Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Tips and Tools for Investigating Wildlife Crime. Before we begin, we have a bit of very quick housekeeping. Please use the Q&A box for any questions that you have at any point throughout this session. You can use the chat box for general comments or communications. If you'd like to say something, please raise your hand by using the little icon at the bottom of the screen and we'll get to you. When asked to do so, you can turn on your camera so that we can see who we're speaking to, unmute yourself and start speaking. And then lastly, we'll also remind you about this at the end of the session, but before you leave here today, we ask that you complete a very short survey, just so we know who you are, get a few of your details, and to get some feedback on the session. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. I'd like to provide you with a bit of context and background to this event very briefly. So as you know, this event is hosted by Oxpeckers Investigative Environmental Journalism, but it is also part of a much bigger regional program to address wildlife crime. So in 2018, USAID Southern Africa launched an activity called VukaNow to complement 6 projects in 4 different landscapes across Southern Africa. The aim of this program is to significantly reduce poaching and illegal trade in wildlife and to enhance law enforcement capacity. So working with journalists in the region is one of these activities. And what you've been invited to today is part of a project to build the capacity of data wranglers and investigative journalists to improve their impacts. So in the morning, we ran a number of sessions for data wranglers who've been invited to participate in the Oxpeckers Wild Eye Training and Professional Support Program. This process of support will continue over the next 5 months. And some of the sessions, such as this one, will be open to journalist networks. We'll also be inviting you to the sessions in the next module, which will be next month, that will focus on legal tools for data access. And then, very exciting, in November, we'll invite everyone to what we're calling a shared learning event, where the participants will share with the audience their experiences and lessons learned during the full program. But we will send and share more of that information with you closer to the time. So today's open session will focus on tips and tools for improving wildlife crime reporting. And in these sessions, we hope to bring to your attention tips gathered from experienced journalists in the region and beyond. We'll also be introducing you to various tools and demonstrate how they can be used in daily journalistic practice. The first is Wild Eye, a geojournalism tool created by Oxpeckers more than 2 years ago. In the coming months, we'll be launching a Southern African version of this tool. Currently, we have one based in Europe and another in Asia. We'll be taking you through some of the challenges we've encountered and some of the biggest successes that have come out of this project. We will also be introducing the eVukaLearn platform, which is a fantastic online tool that offers training for journalists in wildlife crime. As I say, if you have any questions throughout these sessions, you can drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to answer all of them. We will have a chance for questions and answers once we've gone through both of our presentations. So please allow me to share my screen. I'm sure you've heard that so many times over the past 1.5 years. Okay, so my name is Roxanne, and I work with Oxpeckers on the Wild Eye mapping tools. So what is Wild Eye? Wild Eye is an online tool that maps seizures, arrests, court cases, and convictions of illegal wildlife trafficking. It was a tool that was developed by journalists for journalists, but this doesn't mean that it's exclusively for journalists. It's just that that's the perspective that we were coming from when we created it. How we did this was we created our own data set using multiple sources, and I'll speak a bit about the sources later on. And we made this data set accessible. On top of that, it allows you a personalized access to data. So you can either look at the whole map, which I'll show you what it looks like, or you can look at specific information. Perhaps you're interested in one case in particular. You can navigate to that case and see information about that case only. WildEye can be used for a lot of different reasons. A few of them include analysis, research, and storytelling. So why WildEye? Why now? We set out when we created this tool to answer the question of what are law enforcement doing? This is a question that applies globally. We've found in our research and our work on at least 3 different continents that access to this type of information for the general public and to us as journalists was very difficult to find, which is what led us to create this tool in a free, open, easy, very user-friendly platform. Of course, we've just gone through, or I suppose are still going through, a global health crisis. And this pandemic has meant that wildlife trafficking is no longer a concern just for environmentalists or conservationists. Given its links to COVID-19 and the relationship between us and animals and the diseases that exist within that relationship, wildlife trafficking has become a concern for all. And until now, there has been no single place to access this information easily. But WildEye aims to address this gap by sharing data on justice and action. So you can go to the map and you can see where law enforcement is able to be effective and exactly what is happening in a country. So what does WildEye actually do? I'm going to show you very quickly. My apologies. Okay, so this is what WildEye Asia in this instance looks like. You can see a map of the whole world, of course, and eventually down the line, we'll have all of these continents, at least parts that it's relevant in, populated with data. But at the moment, this map in particular, you'll see most of the points obviously focused here. That's because this is situated in the Asian region. So if we zoom in a little bit, you can see, you can either do that by using your trackpad or your mouse, or these buttons allow you to obviously zoom in and out. If you click on an area of focus, you'll see it takes you in even more and more and more. And then you'll see different color kind of icons with different little graphics on them to represent the 4 different categories of information that we're showing here. So we've got seizures in green, arrests in red, court cases in blue, and then convictions in yellow. There we go. You can also decide to see only seizures. Perhaps you want to see convictions only, or like we were before, all categories. So when you select a point, you'll see that each data point contains information such as a suspect's name. Obviously, this isn't always possible. The charges and description, place of arrest or seizure, the date, the item seized, the number of items seized, if possible, the trade route, and sometimes we include the methodology, whether it was by sea or air, for example. The sentence, if there was one, and then a link to the source. All of our data is verified. It goes through quite a strict process of verification to ensure that we put good, trustworthy data and information out there. You can also use this search button. So perhaps you would like to search for pangolin. Then all of the data points that include pangolin will appear on the screen, and you can zoom into those and find the details of the case. The last thing that I want to draw your attention to is this button over here. You can click to receive alerts. So if you would like to track a case from seizure or arrest all the way to seeing it go to court and then the outcome of that court case, you just pop your email in here, and whenever there are updates on that case, you'll receive them via your email. You can also subscribe to a particular area. So how you do that is it just depends where you're zoomed in on. Perhaps you'd like to subscribe to the entire map, then it'll allow you to do that. If you want to subscribe to maybe a particular region or country, you simply zoom in, and all of the points that appear in your frame, as soon as you subscribe, you'll receive updates on those. And then just to quickly say that all of our maps come with a dossier of incredibly impressive investigations that have all of the data that's been used in these investigations is published on WildEye. And all of these investigations in turn are driven by the data that's included in WildEye. So I encourage you to have a look at this tool and all of the tools listed here on the side. We have a lot of data and information. Okay, I'm just going to go back to my presentation now. Okay, so how can you use WildEye? You can use WildEye to track data, trends, or patterns. Maybe you want to find out where a lot of crime is happening in a particular country. Maybe you're interested in a particular route. Maybe it's a particular commodity that you are doing research or an investigative story on, and you'd like to find information about that in particular. Then you can just follow the steps that I've just gone through to do that. So like I say, you can use it to track specific data, cases, information, trends, or patterns. You can also use it to identify new stories and angles. We have, as I said, we have a huge data set, and there's no way that each point is only one story. Each data point includes a multitude of different stories. So it really is a goldmine of stories and story angles. Some of the challenges, lessons, and successes that we've encountered over the past few years. Obviously, a more recent one is the pandemic, which means that getting some data, especially in countries where you have to personally be there, is very difficult. It's also made it difficult for the journalists who are actually conducting these investigations to do certain parts of their jobs. And we've really had to adapt the way we do our stories so as to ensure that our journalists and our team behind WildEye remain safe throughout their work. Funding and resources, I just always like to mention this one because I think, as with, in most countries, most journalists will experience a lack of these, a lack of support for these, and a lack of understanding as to how important funding and resources really are. So I encourage you to, support journalism, support this type of journalism by using this tool, sharing this information, and spreading it among your networks. A little bit really does go a long way. And then, of course, the big one, which we heard a lot about in our sessions this morning from our journalists based across the region, was access to good data. So this comes in the form of bureaucracy, politics, bad governance, also a lack of funding and resources, just the inability to be able to keep this information stored in a way that makes it easily accessible. So what we've done to try and overcome this as best we can is to identify and then work with local journalists in order to get this data. So it really does sometimes take someone, picking up the phone, being able to speak the proper language, having the correct context and understanding of what's actually going on in a country to be able to get that data and that information. So the journalists that we've worked with really have been crucial in getting this information and building this entire map. And then I would say that our biggest success among several has been building such a strong community with shared resources, data, and stories. Initially, we had this map, we commissioned some journalists, and we really tried to get the data all by ourselves. And again, we found that working with local journalists really was key and really was the only way to tap into that, the richness of the data that does exist there and that needs to be put out in the open in the way that we're doing. So just to end off, I would like to encourage you to join the Wild Eye community. You can do this by getting the data. We allow for specific data requests. You can also share your data, as you'll see below. You can pitch a story, although we can't always guarantee that we can run your story now, but we hope to do so somewhere down the line. And as I've said, to really share this resource, because a little bit does go a long way. I would quickly just like to play a video of an experience from one of the local journalists that we worked with, who's based in the Philippines. So this is just a very short clip from a webinar that we hosted last month, where we brought journalists from across Asia together to discuss their experiences of working with Wild Eye and doing investigations with Wild Eye.
The story that I did for Wild Eye Asia project really focuses on wildlife crime cases and convictions. Access to data is really a challenge. I highlight 3 points which I found some roadblocks in my reporting for this particular story. Number one, there is an absence of a centralized database for wildlife crime. And the absence of a centralized database would also lead to some gaps and inconsistencies in data and information. This would mean that in the course of my reporting, I had to approach different agencies and really go through different kinds of documents to be able to get the data that I need for the story. And then at the same time, there is also the absence of a single agency that is tasked to oversee all wildlife or environmental crime in the Philippines. You know, these challenges are not just the very challenges that journalists in the Philippines face in our reporting, but I'd also like to think that these are some of the obstacles that the government must hurdle in order to properly see if, they are actually, getting some successes in their battle against wildlife crime. Of course, there's also the challenge in accessing sources in case studies. There are two main roadblocks in that note. Number one is the lockdowns, of course, because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the other one, which existed even before the pandemic happened, is geographical limitations. So most of the case studies that I highlighted in the story are thousands of kilometers from where I am. And because of the lockdowns, I can't fly or I can't travel to really visit, for example, the regional environment offices or the local or provincial probation or even the local courts. And so there's really that challenge of accessing the sources, the sources of information and even the paper trail that I needed for the story. And so I'm just really thankful that I was able to build relationship with the sources, the government officials and the other stakeholders, wildlife experts that I've spoken to in the past several years of doing wildlife reporting, that they were able to link me to the right people and basically help me and lead me towards the sources of information that are valuable for my story. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of, the reporting has really shifted into focusing into the virus, the recession, the economic challenges that we are facing because of the pandemic. But I think that, these collaborations with, for instance, the Oxpeckers Center and the Internews Earth Journalism Network really just highlights how important it is to continue reporting on environment and wildlife issues, to continue mainstreaming these kinds of issues, because even if environment stories kind of took a back seat in this time, it is important to make people remember that this virus that we are facing at the moment, it's rooted in how we as human beings interact with our natural environment.
Thank you so much. So just to, as a reminder, that was a very short clip from our Wild Eye Asia convening, and that was an investigative journalist, Jesse Nanano, who was speaking about her challenges and some of the lessons that she learned in doing a data-driven investigation. And you can read that story on Wild Eye Asia, and it was actually published locally on the front page of the newspaper that she works for, the Philippine Daily Inquirer. Lastly, I'd like to speak about what's next, and I did briefly allude to this in my introduction. So we will be expanding Wild Eye and these types of projects to feeder regions for global wildlife crimes, such as Southern Africa. And we've been wanting to obviously come to Southern Africa, which is where we are physically based, for quite some time. But we felt that exploring other parts of the world first made sense, just based on our timeline and what was going on in the world at the time. So we're very excited to launch Wild Eye Southern Africa in the coming months. We will also continue to be involved in transnational collaborative projects. And this is really something that we spent a lot of this morning discussing with our investigative journalists and data wranglers, is that we're trying to encourage collaborative teams with a mixed set of skills as much as possible. And this is how we have been working for the past while, using this data to drive these investigations and kind of swapping skills between the two types of researchers, let's say. So this particular project that today forms a part of involves the training of a number of data wranglers from around Southern Africa. And they will be collecting data ahead of the launch of Wild Eye Southern Africa. And this will be information about seizures, arrests, court cases, and convictions that are in their countries and areas of focus specifically. They'll be analyzing this data, and then it will be added to the map and can then be used by any journalists who are interested in pursuing investigations related to wildlife crime. We'll continue to work closely with monitoring organizations, and this is kind of where the relationship with locally based journalists comes hand in hand. We contact local organizations such as NGOs, for example, through them, and this is how we get excellent data to be added to our map. And of course, we will continue to grow the Wild Eye community. So for now, it will be a case of 3 mapping tools, but as time goes by, and it's happening a lot faster than I think we thought it would, just because of how wildlife crime has become such a hot topic in the past year and a half. We hope to, in the coming months and years, have a global mapping tool that showcases, or not showcases, rather highlights wildlife trafficking across the world. And these are our social media platforms. So please follow us. Like I said, it doesn't have to be money or resources that help us to spread the message of what we're trying to do. Just a share really goes a long way. And we encourage you to use Wild Eye, look at the tool. If you have any feedback or any questions, you can reach out to us on any of these platforms. Felix Matsava asked, what are data wranglers? Data wranglers, this is quite a broad term, but data wranglers are just people who can work with data. So that ranges from people who are expert coders or developers and can create, extremely fancy and intricate data visualizations, to all of the journalists, or some of the journalists that we've worked with, who dig through big bits of information, often in the parts of the world that we're based in, are contained in PDFs that are very difficult to access and understand. They sort through that information and they turn it into something that is easier to understand and can be used by others for not just access to information, but also analysis, research, and storytelling of their own. So we have data wranglers based in Botswana, Mozambique, South Africa, and a few other countries within the Southern African region. Alexander Winkler, is fisheries crime included into the dataset? If you consider fish and sharks as wildlife, it would be interesting to gauge where seizures and arrests are occurring. It might, however, already be included. So yes, this information is included in WildEye. I can't tell you exactly off the top of my head how many specific data points are. But we do have quite a lot of information, particularly when it comes to things like eels and sharks, obviously a big one, turtles as well, all kinds of marine wildlife. So if you're interested in that information, then you can go onto the WildEye platform or contact us if it's something that you are specifically looking for. But I would say that it's actually one of the most popular let's say types of commodities that are listed on our platform. So I agree that it would be very interesting to gauge where seizures and arrests are occurring. There's a lot in countries like China, Vietnam, India, and Indonesia, just for example. I know that those are some of the hotspots when it comes to fishery crimes. And then we have another question from one of our journalists, John Krobler, who asked how to keep up with so many cases. This is exactly why we created WildEye. So obviously it's not possible for one individual person to follow every single case, but we ensure that the information is as up to date as possible. Again, through work with like our data wranglers and locally based journalists to verify and work with this information, which is then added to WildEye. And you can use the alert system to see how an incident goes from a seizure or an arrest to court, if it goes to court at all, which often, as a lot of people will know, isn't the case. And then what the outcome of that court case actually is. Chris Gegenheimer, who has been with the organization Chemonics for the past 6 or so years. And Chris currently works as their digital development specialist for the USAID VukaNow activity. As I said, Chris will be giving us a virtual tour of the eVukaLearn platform. And this platform offers what we call a self-directed training program of 5 different modules that journalists can use when invited to participate in the training. And our team has already done quite a bit of the training, and we found it incredibly useful and an incredibly rich resource to get journalists and anyone interested in environmental or wildlife crime thinking about things that perhaps they may not have thought when it comes to reporting on wildlife trafficking. So thank you so much for joining us today, Chris. We really look forward to learning a bit more about the eVukaLearn platform. Over to you, Chris.
Great, thanks so much. Like Roxanne, right, said, my name is Chris Gegenheimer. I'm actually back in Washington, D.C. Currently, but for the past 1.5 years, I've been based in Pretoria working on the USAID VukaNow project implemented by Chemonics, as was mentioned. One of the things that we've worked on, and then actually I see Jackie's on the call, so we kicked this off a few years ago, even before I showed up. But one of the things we've been working on VukaNow is developing an online learning platform for a variety of stakeholders. One important group is journalists. So what you're looking at on the screen now is the VukaLearn platform, including the course for combating wildlife crime as a journalist, which you can see down here. So I've basically logged in as a user who would have access, or a learner who would have access to this particular course for journalists. And I'll talk a little bit about how to gain access in just a moment. But there's sort of a two-step process. But once you have access to the course, what you would do is you would come onto the log into the VukaLearn platform, evukalearn.com, with your username, password, and then whatever course you're enrolled in would show up here, either in all of your courses or the ones that you have recently accessed. For this particular user, there's just the journalist course. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. So you would click on this, and then you are brought to a splash screen where there's a welcome information area, learning information, and a collaboration area. The welcome area is more or less just, an introduction to the content itself, as well as an invitation to join the community area, where you can note who you are, what your interest, background, things of that nature. And this would be available for other learners on the journalist course to see and to access. So that it doesn't mean that everybody on every course would see it. It would just be limited to just the journalist course. Then there's a learn section, and this has two portions to it. Well, three really. There's a pre-assessment, which I'll explain in just a second. And then there's the actual course content itself, and then there's the post-assessment. The pre-assessment and the post-assessment are essentially the same test, but ideally you would be able to improve your score from the pre-assessment after you've gone through the content itself. But you'll see this is grayed out, and that's because in order to unlock the content and then the post-assessment, you need to complete the pre-assessment. So I'll walk through that in just a moment. And then there's a collaborate area as well, where there's a discussion forum and a chat room. So again, for the learners who are part of the journalist course, the discussion forum acts as sort of more of a traditional bullet board system, where there's a discussion thread and you can speak back and forth with each other in an asynchronous fashion. There's also a chat room. So if multiple learners are online at the same time who are part of this course, then there could be sort of a more real-time instant message style chat. So these are the two collaboration areas. So in order to actually access the content, you will have to do this pre-assessment, but it's essentially 10 multi-choice questions. And so I'll just go ahead and click the attempt the quiz now, and I'm just going to tick these boxes. Some of them are single select, some of them are multi-select, and again, there are only 10 of them, I believe. So we'll just go here, and we type.
Chris, sorry if I can interrupt you for a second. A few people have just asked if you could speak up a little bit. Thank you.
Sure. Sorry, might be the location of the microphone relevant.
Thank you. I think that's better.
Okay. Yeah. So you just open up the pre-assessment, you answer the questions, and down here there's a button which says finish attempt, which we'll go ahead and do. It says enter saved, and then you would submit all and finish. It says, are you sure you want to submit? You say yes. And you can see I did very poorly. I got all of these ones wrong. Question 9 I got correct, and question 10 I got partially correct. And the quiz will tell you, you got 1.75 out of 10, which is obviously terrible. And then there's feedback related to each of the individual questions. Now, you don't have to achieve any particular score in order to advance. You just need to have completed it. So at the bottom, you see the journalist course link is available, or if you come back to the Learn section, you see this has now gone from gray to blue, so now I can access the content. So if I click on journalist course, there's another small little splash screen, and then you click enter, and a new window will pop up with the course content. And you would click start, and it says welcome, an introduction to what's in the content, a link back to that same discussion forum that we spoke about before. And this content, you essentially work your way down vertically through the content, and there are interactive elements that you can read. There are resources to download, and as you make your way down, there are some knowledge checks, and you basically keep scrolling all the way down. And as you go down on the left-hand side, you'll notice the tick mark will show up to say, yes, you're 100% done with this particular section. And you can see all the different sections of the course here. And you can technically jump around to different sections. If you're more interested in one area than another, you could do that. Based on where you are, your progress will be saved. So if you see I'm almost done with how the media reports on wildlife crime, I click exit and I close my window and I come back into the journalist course, it will remember my progress. So you can see it picks up right exactly where I left off. So after all of these boxes or the circles come into the tick box, then that post-assessment course will, post-assessment test will also enable. You can take that and basically see if you've improved your score, which in my case, hopefully I would have from 1.5 to hopefully more than that. And at that point, the course will be completed. But you'll still have access to the forum and the chat room in case people start new conversations or have additional chats just beyond the actual self-directed resource course itself. So it's not just the course, but that network of other journalists or interested parties who are learning about wildlife journalism that you would remain having access to. It wouldn't cut off your access to that module once you're done. It's just there's only this one self-guided module at the moment. I can talk a little bit. I'll bring up the actual discussion forum, but then another additional note is you're obviously looking at the website right now, but there's an iOS and an Android app for this as well. So once you're registered and enrolled, you can download VukaLearn onto your phone, use your login credentials, and then you can have the modules with you if your internet connection is slow once it's downloaded, or if you get cut off from your access online with your data connection or whatever. If you don't have that connection, once you've done that initial download, you'll have access to all the content. The only thing to note about both the website and the apps is that there is a little bit of a session timeout issue. So as you saw that, it remembered my progress here, but let's say I load this up and I, walk away for say 5 hours and I come back and I continue my scrolling to complete everything. You're better off just reopening it because if you've had it open for 5 hours, because the session it might, and we've sort of seen this from time to time, not necessarily remember all of the progress that you've made after sitting idle for several hours. So very small glitch, but otherwise no issues with remembering the progress on either the desktop or the mobile app, as long as you go straight through. So I'll go ahead and close this real quick, and I'm going to come back into the collaborate session, and I'll open up the discussion forum real quick, and you can see there's already some content in here. So it looks like some of the folks are starting to use this discussion board. So if we just pick up on one thread, you can see there's some conversation back and forth already. And then so you can either reply to the comment, you can subscribe to the discussion forum to get updates on the conversation, or you can add a brand new discussion topic. So each one of these threads is theoretically about whatever the discussion topic is. So there may be several posts and replies within this discussion thread, or you can add a whole new topic if you don't see the one there. Now this currently isn't really moderated, so it's just the learners who are on the course talking amongst themselves. This is not a public website, so in order to have access, you need to have a username and password, and that's something that we'll talk about in just a second about how we can facilitate that process. But just as a reminder, it's not a public website. It's intended for this community of journalist learners. I'll stop there in case there are any questions about the platform or anything, and then I can talk a little bit about access just after that. But I'll take a quick pause.
Thanks so much, Chris. It really is a fantastic resource with a lot of interactive ways of collaborating and of learning. I think there are a few questions, but I would like you, before those questions, just to speak a bit about the thinking behind the platform, just to elaborate more on kind of the history of it, how it came together, why the content that's included in it. If you could speak a bit to that.
Yeah, sure thing. So it was, we had actually been planning this well before the pandemic started, just recognizing that VukaNow was a regional project, and we're covering multiple countries, multiple stakeholder groups, and we can't possibly be hosting in-person trainings everywhere for everyone, not just from a logistics perspective, but also from a cost perspective. So early on, the team recognized that there would be a need to make resources such as this and some other content available to a wide variety of stakeholders. And we traditionally had done this by having a workshop, a couple days of a workshop, we fly, 15, 20 people to a particular location, pay for the lodging, pay for the meals, and pay for that, all of which is great, fantastic networking event. But there are so many more people that we possibly didn't know about or couldn't afford to accommodate in that kind of setting. So this kind of online resource is really designed to reach a much broader audience than we could do with a traditional, in-person workshop. And especially for wildlife journalism, that was partially an underappreciated sector that was definitely included in part in the VukaNow objectives. So we have a specific focus in our program to supporting better wildlife journalism. So that was part of the motivation for having this course included in the online learning platform.
Great, thanks so much.
Okay,
so
I will, not to put you on the spot, Jackie, but if you wanted to add anything, since you were around at the inception of eVukaLearn as well, feel free to jump in.
And please just introduce yourself, Jackie, if you do decide to answer.
Okay.
Hi,
So,
sorry for that delay. I just figured out how to unmute myself, despite having been on the Zoom call all day. The technical challenges do persist. But yeah, I just wanted to say I think you really captured. I think VukaNow was actually a little bit ahead of its time, you know, in anticipating the need for online trainings such as the eVukaLearn platform in its ability to reach such a broad audience and also to help with connecting people in a transnational way. So, you know, really the value also of the module is to connect journalists across the region working on the same topics, but also working together on issues that are transnational. So that would just be something that I'd like to also encourage users to make use of and fully sort of maximize that value for themselves.
So there are two questions from people. So Alexis has asked, is the USAID learning tool free of charge? And someone else has asked if there are any certificates issued once you complete the course.
Sure thing. Great questions. So to answer the first question, yes, it is free of charge. There's no cost to you as a journalist or a learner to complete the course or access the materials. So the way we would do this is, and again, we need to think about what winds up being the most efficient way, because up until now we've worked with our partners Oxpeckers to sort of collate a list of users, and we've added them to the journalist course. So what'll happen is I would receive the list of emails and names, and I would add you to the back end of the course to the platform as a user, and that gives you essentially a username and password and a login, and then that will sort of let you onto the platform. But then there's a next step of enrolling you in the course. So I tried to do that all at the same time, but there's sometimes a small time lag of 10-15 minutes between when you get the email notification that you have a login and password and then when you can actually access the content. That mechanism will probably, for this group, continue to work well, where if Oxpeckers could help to sort of group the interested users, we can take it from there. We also have an expression of interest form, which I can send that link around as well, where you could sort of fill out that information, and then we get a notification that that occurs. But that's again on a one-off basis. So it might be better to have Oxpeckers pull that information for this particular group. But there is no, regardless, there's no charge to you. This is a free service. And then for the second question, at the moment, we don't have a certificate of completion that comes with this particular course, though that question has come up a few times. So I do believe we'll be looking into that.
Great, thank you so much. So I suppose just to say, obviously, Oxpeckers is happy to facilitate or help facilitate anyone who is on this webinar who would like to join. If you would like to sign up for the course, we'll have your contact details from the survey before you leave the webinar anyway. So please just let us know. One of the questions is about the session. So I think if you can just indicate in that you're interested, then we will send your details, pass your details on to Chris and his team. I have a question for, if they're willing, for John and Alexis, who both kind of mentioned, sorry, Chris, to take the spotlight off you for a minute,
No
just to go back to WildEye. I know that you've both interacted with the tool, so we just wanted to know I suppose maybe we can start with Alexis, who in June last year did an investigation or wrote about the burning of China's stockpiles of pangolin scales. If you could just elaborate, I know you kind of have answered in the chat, but if you could just elaborate on your experience of the tool and why, what about it do you find so useful? I can allow you to talk. Here we go. Again, if you're willing.
Hi. I haven't used the tool, but I'm looking at it now while you presented it here. And yeah, I just think it's an absolutely fantastic tool. I know that we, as the African Pangolin Working Group, will be working with Oxpeckers and Wildeye in terms of providing data information for our confiscations. As an organization, we, follow right through, and in fact are personally involved in everything from the, sting operations and retrieval of pangolins out of the trade. This is in South Africa. Right through to sitting in and giving evidence in aggravation in court cases. And we, our highest precedent is 9 years. The maximum that's allowed is 10 years. So we're very close to, the full maximum sentencing on pangolin related wildlife crimes. But I often wonder what does happen in these court cases, and I often wonder whether there is an organization that sits in on every court case and gives evidence in aggravation. I'm not sure that this is the case. And, I sometimes wonder who are the organizations overseeing these crimes. We are mandated by the government, and we have a standard operating procedure for everything from confiscation right up to releasing to appropriate wildlife areas. So we take personal responsibility for a pangolin, every and each individual one, right through the process. But how many organizations do that? I don't know if this is the right question to ask on this forum, but given the fact that there are so many NGOs, say, dealing with rhino conservation, does anybody take individual responsibility for these? And, how can we be sure that every confiscation is getting the attention that it needs, right through and up to giving evidence in aggravation? But there's certainly, we will be providing data to Wildeye and Oxpeckers on all of our pangolin confiscations, and we keep a very detailed inventory of all, for all of these. Thanks.
Thanks, Alexis. We appreciate that. And just to say, the questions that you're asking, that's exactly how, those questions are exactly what led us to create this tool in the first place. And I think you put it really well when you said it also helps for holding the right powers and people accountable to make this information accessible. John, I'm not sure if you have anything to add on top of that. Please don't feel pressured to speak.
Well, of course, when I worked on the story last year, it wasn't complete yet, and it was fantastic to see my input actually become this fantastic resource. It is something I've been asking for and that I've been discussing with Fiona ever since I started writing for Oxpeckers back in 2014 about wildlife crime, and it is the most developed tool I've seen yet in terms of organized crime, which is something I've been chasing, past 20 years now, basically. So yeah, it's what I would like to add to here is that there are many NGOs involved in rhino conservation and so forth, but there are also people out in the field, and they do not always pick up on current events. For example, this past week there was a 2 days ago, they arrested 2 guys just south of the Etosha Pans with, 4 fresh rhino horns in the car. But it hasn't come out in any of the official press releases from the MEFT or the police or anybody else yet. And the risk is always, cases like this can get lost. So, we need to maybe look at, developing bots who can just, sweep social media for any reference with, on this stuff, because this is where I first saw this case being reported. Some policeman, shot a selfie of him and these guys that he caught in the car. So we could maybe, develop it even further. But, as it stands now, fantastic. Well done, Roxanne, for, doing all this.
Well done to Fiona and and the Oxpeckers team. Thank you both for that. Alexander asked a follow-up question from the fisheries crime question, saying that they are aware of at least one other similar geofurnace fisheries crime database. Would it be possible to share data between these online platforms? For example, if wildlife picked up in a criminal event, it could be automatically shared with another data source and vice versa. Excellent question. Sorry. I think the point in our tool and the point in tools like it, and perhaps this is a really nice way to tie this into the VukaNow platform, is to create this community, is to create this network and tap into these types of resources. I can't speak to a kind of technically based direct swap. At the moment, that's not something that's possible on our end, but thank you so much for drawing our attention to that database. We definitely will be reaching out to them, and hopefully we can share data. So, like I said, while I was speaking about data and this community, we have a lot of data kind of sharing practices with a lot of different monitoring organizations. And we ask that anyone who has data or wants data reaches out to us so that we can swap and share and really build up this database. So thank you for drawing our attention to that. Felix, you have your hand up. I just wanted to check if there's something, a question you have, a comment you'd like to make. Okay, and Sonia, I think it's just that you both clicked by accident. Hi, Felix, sorry, you've put your hand up. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I have a question.
Go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, is there a certain time frame or period by which we are supposed to complete this certain training? Thank you.
Chris, I think that question is for you, just about a time frame. Do you have a set amount of time in which you have to complete the course?
No. VukaNow's going on for several more months, and so you have essentially until VukaNow is over. There's not a defined time period. So it's self-paced, meaning if you have time to start, today, tomorrow, and you get through just one module and you close it, and then you're busy with other responsibilities and you come back in a month, you'll be in exactly the same position. So there's no time ticking from when you load the course until when you have to finish.
Great, thanks, Chris. So just Felix, you have until at least the end of the year, but probably longer than that. Okay, last chance for questions. Just before I ask Chris for some closing remarks. No, okay. Chris?
There we go. Okay. Yeah, so thank you all for the opportunity to present the VukaLearn platform and the journalist course. You know, I know we didn't go through all of the content on the course itself, but hopefully you had a taste and a flavor of what's available and the kind of information and how it could be relevant to your work. And we really encourage you to sign up yourself. And then if you have other journalist colleagues and contacts who are not part of this particular webinar who you think would be interested in accessing the resource as well, please let us know. The intention is to make this available to as many folks as possible. So we're really encouraged to see all of this interest and happy to facilitate your access and then even broader access to sort of up the awareness of reporting on wildlife crime, its importance, and sort of ways to make it more effective.
Thank you so much, Chris. We will send a follow-up email to this webinar with the presentation and any of the relevant links, including, I think, a link to the form that Chris mentioned, so that you can express your interest if that is the case. So thank you so much to Chris, but also to our other kind of impromptu guest presenters. We would like to extend an invitation to everyone here to contact them should you require any more information or would like to make use of these tools. And as I said, you will receive all of this information in a follow-up email. You will also get an invite to a session in the middle of next month, which is August, that will focus on the legal tools and procedures for accessing data for combating wildlife crime. And this session will, we'll be very lucky to be joined by a legal specialist from the Legal Resources Center who will talk us through accessing that data and information. Like I said in the beginning, before you sign off, please complete the survey. It's very quick. It's just to get some basic information from you. Indicate your interest in any of the tools. And we hope to see you in our next session. My very last comment is just to acknowledge and say thank you to USAID for the grant managed by Comonix in order to conduct this event. So can all of our data wranglers please stay on just for a few minutes? And to everyone else, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We hope that you stay safe and stay warm. Thank you, everyone.